Welcome back. With 9 days until Election Day, we've asked the chairs of both the Democratic and Republican parties in our state to join us. We'll speak with Republican Party Chair Ben Proto shortly, but we begin with State Democratic Chair Nancy DiNardo. Nancy, welcome.
Thank you.
As we head into this final sprint to Election Day, what's the state of the Democratic Party in Connecticut?
Oh, it's great. I can't get over the number of volunteers that are out there that want to work in Connecticut, but also want to go to other states to help. And the enthusiasm is, I've never seen it, people as enthusiastic as they are this time.
Is your job as a Democratic Party chair different than maybe your colleagues in other states in that a lot of people just presume the top of the ticket is a done deal? Do you look at it that way, or do you have to look at it differently?
Well, I don't look at it that way, but I'm sure that people who are in states that might be red states certainly think that, oh, it's a lot easier here, but it never is. And, you know, people want to know what's going on, and, you know, people always looking for something. So it's in my perspective, it's no different, except that we tend to be a blue state, but you can't assume anything, particularly these days. But we have some great candidates, and so we should do very well.
Are there any races in particular that you'll be watching, whether it's a federal race or a state level race? Is there something that when those results come in, you'll be focused in on that?
Well, there's always races that are there. I would always say that our 5th congressional district has always been one that has potential to switch, but I don't see that happening. I mean, it hasn't since Chris Murphy ran when he defeated Nancy Johnson, and Johanna's doing a great job, and so I don't see any problem there. But if there was one congressional district that always seemed to be the one that we look at, it's the 5th congressional district. Now, there are some state senate races and House races that we have potential to pick up. But that's always the case. And again, it's whoever gets the people out to vote will make the difference.
Is it, you've been doing this a long time, is it, you know, the old saying, all politics is local? In a lot of these races that you'll be watching, is that really the key? It's a Senate district, it's a state house districts, things like that, and what those voters hear and see on Election Day is a big deal?
Oh, yes, absolutely. That does make a difference, because it is local. I mean, you're knocking on people's doors or calling people up and asking them to come out and vote. And if you get the people you've identified out to vote, then you should be able to win. And like I said, we're looking at some state Senate seats that aren't currently Democratic that we could possibly pick up. So.
If there's been criticism, and there has been a lot of criticism on both sides, it's been about the ads, and a lot of people saying, gosh, and I know it's in many cases outside groups buying some of these ads, but ads about, you know, just the Johanna Hayes, George Logan, some of the ads from outside groups taking a pretty nasty tone on both sides. Do you hear that as the party chair, and do you have an opinion on it, that people just get sort of a bad taste in their mouth?
Well, I think people get tired of the ads anyway, because they seem to, as we get closer, they seem to be more constant. And yeah, it isn't great. I know an average person doesn't want to see all the negative stuff, particularly if that's a candidate that they're supporting. But there is no control over that, and it just happens.
What do you make of the fact that on the statewide level, there's a lot of races that we've seen before? You know, Courtney in France and Hayes and Logan. You know, we're going to see Trump running Biden, you know, on the federal level. Does that change anything strategy-wise for a party when some of those bigger, high-profile races are repeat contests?
No, it really doesn't. I mean, you know, to an average person it might, but to us, you know, we have our plan on how we plan to win, and we stick with it. And that's the most important thing to do, is once you make a plan and have a strategy, you don't flip on it, because that could be more difficult then. But so you know what you want to do to win, and that's what you do.
We said it's all local. We have about a minute left, and unfortunately, you're the statewide lady, so you're going to have to give us a statewide perspective. When people go to the voting booth in 9 days, why should they be going across that Democratic column?
Well, I think because if you look at our candidates as compared to, particularly at the top of the ticket, we have a great candidate who has worked for people and is there to help people. Kamala Harris is obviously out there doing that. Trump is in it for himself. I mean, he doesn't really care about an average person. He likes the dictators and people, his own people who were in his cabinet and worked for him and the generals. I mean, they're obviously not supporting him. So that says a lot.
All right, Nancy DiNardo, we appreciate you being with us.
Thank you.
Well, one of the big questions is, what issues are voters most importantly talking about? What are they thinking about when they're making their decisions? Channel 3's chief political reporter Susan Raff and CT Insider's Dan Haar recently traveled across the state to get those answers, hosting Connecticut campaign conversations. Here's some of what they were told.
What do you think for business owners? I mean, what are the things that are important to you?
Food costs, inflation is really an impact to us.
I know it is to have a job and not have a job. So I feel that once we get people back working again, it brings a sense of pride, a sense of empowerment.
I don't want to really commit to either candidate at this point, but I'll have to keep listening to what they're going to offer us.
A lot of these problems are staying the same, and nobody's really, they'll talk about it, they'll, keep pointing it here and there, but they don't do anything about it. So it just kind of gets worse and worse.
All right, so we heard from the Democratic chair, we heard from some voters, and now Ben Proto is joining us. He's the chairman of the state's Republican Party. I'll ask you the same question I asked Nancy at the top. What's the state of the Republican Party 9 days from Election Day?
State Republican Party is in really good shape. We just started early voting this year for the first time. We're into day 6 or 7 now on Sunday. When we looked at the first number of days, you can register same day to early vote. We're seeing a huge number of people registering Republican. So that gives us a great feeling about where we're going. You're not registering Republican and then voting Democrat on that day. So we think the Republican Party is in really great shape. We've got great candidates running across the state, and I think we're going to have a good night on November 8th. Or 5th, I'm sorry, November 5th.
Well, maybe the 8th will be a good night, too.
Maybe the 8th will be a good night, because we may still be counting by then.
Tell me what you think, and again, it's hard because we're talking statewide, and so many of these races come down to local issues, but is there a theme you've heard from people who say, you know what, Ben, I'm with you, I'm with the Republicans? What's the reason why?
They can't afford to live here. The Democrats have destroyed the fiscal nature of families. Look, we just saw the United Way of Connecticut issue their Alice report, where 40% of families in this state can't pay their bills week to week, paycheck to paycheck. Connecticut is lagging behind the nation in job creation and wage growth. If we look at the economic statistics since Joe Biden became president in January of 2021, to today, the average Connecticut family is paying over $1,100 more a month for the same basket of goods that they were in January of 2021. That's wholly on the Democrats. That's on Joe Biden. That's on the Democrats in the legislature, making Connecticut a wholly unaffordable state.
We talk about some of these being rematch races, and Logan and Hayes being one of them. We heard this week that the Congressional Leadership Fund has shifted some money out of our state going elsewhere. What's your take on that race? And when you have the same two candidates matching up again, be it France and Courtney or Hayes and Logan, does that change the strategy as a party chair?
As a party chair, look, our candidates, we have some really great candidates. George Logan, Mike France, the two you mentioned, are very strong candidates. The 5th Congressional District has been a target race for both sides this year, and it will continue to be a target race right up to 8 o'clock on November 5th. And I suspect that we're going to see a new member of Congress from the 5th Congressional District.
But isn't that question, then why did they pull the money?
Well, at some point you look at the numbers and you say he doesn't need our help anymore. He's just moving forward and running and on a winning track.
You talked about the early voting. If there was one political controversy in Connecticut leading up to this, it was Senator Rob Sampson saying that he has questions about election security. Do you share those concerns? He's particularly talking absentee ballots, not early voting, but absentee ballots. And does that play a part in how you'll be watching returns on Election Day?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, there's a question on the ballot for no excuse absentee voting, which Matt Blumenthal, who's the chairman of the Elections Committee, has indicated that passes. We go to full mail-in voting. We don't need no excuse absentee voting, particularly given now that we have 14 days of early voting. Look, if you're disabled, can't get out of your house, or are ill, absolutely use an absentee. There's no reason for absentee. People should vote no on that question, because what it will do is it will call into question the security and integrity of our elections. What we saw in Bridgeport, what we saw in Stamford, what we've seen in Hartford and New Haven, people being convicted of crimes, people charged with crimes, to the point where people are being charged with crimes and then continuing to do it again, which is what we saw in Bridgeport. So yeah, that's an issue issue. I think the legislature, the Democrats in the legislature have failed to address those issues. There's a lot of things they can do, not the least of which is getting our voter rolls cleaned up. In 2020, when we mailed everybody an application, over 185,000 applications were returned to the Secretary of State as undeliverable. That tells us that the voter rolls are bad. The voter rolls need to be cleaned up. The Democrats need to address that. They need to address mandatory minimum sentencing for election crimes. They need to go to signature verification. You know, one of the reasons why we have early voting was we were one of only 4 states that didn't have it. One of the reasons why we want to do absentee is because we're one of only 10 states, but yet 31 states have signature verification, 10 have notary and/or witnessing requirements. The Democrats are unwilling to do it here in Connecticut because it will suppress the vote, which it doesn't do anywhere else.
Less than a minute left. Tell me the pitch why people should vote for Republicans and any races you'll be watching on Election Day.
If you care about your children's future, if you care about your grandchildren's future, if you care about your retirement, you need to vote Republican, because we know the Democrats are just going to continue to financially destroy you and your families and this state and this country. Republicans will change that. We need common sense in Hartford. We need common sense in Washington, and we know the Democrats don't have that.
And a bellwether race you'll be watching carefully?
We'll be watching the 5th Congressional District, and on the state side for a non-incumbent, I'm going to be looking at the 29th Senate District up in northeastern Connecticut.
All right, Ben Proto, we appreciate you being with us.
Thank you, Eric.